former Sydney FC legend. This evening, we have a man who is joining us, who was an inaugural Hall of Fame inductee and has been involved in every single piece of silverware won at this club. He joined us for the very first season and left only last year after 14 great seasons with the club. Please welcome from Perth, Western Australia, Mr. Terry McFlynn.
Hi, David. How are you? I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. What's life like over in Perth at the moment? Nice and sunny, it looks like.
Very sunny here, Davey. Yeah, it's beautiful, mate. It's obviously these unprecedented times we find ourselves in at the minute. Just enjoying the family time, mate. At home, homeschooling. I've got a whole new respect for school teachers, I'll tell you that. But yeah, look, things is good, mate. We're all good. The sun's shining every day, and life's good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, Terry. Obviously, we're looking forward to getting back on the pitch as soon as possible. But obviously, while we're waiting for that to happen, we're looking, or enjoying, should I say, talking to people like yourself, Sash Petrosky, Dave Carney, some of your former teammates who obviously used to play here at Sydney FC. So just going back a little way, obviously end of last season you had 14 great years with the club, and now you're back in Perth. Just tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there and what happened at the end of last season for you to move back.
Yeah, look, up until obviously recently, I was the academy manager at Perth Glory, working with Richie Garcia, former Sydney FC player as well, and Stephen McGarry and all the academy staff there. So we got the academy kids from under 12s all the way through to NPL first grade. And then I was also involved with the W-League as well, so W-League manager, looking after the operational side of the W-League. So, but yeah, as you said, David, I left at the end of last A-League season. My wife's from Perth, so we spent quite a lot of time here over the last 15 years. And my wife's family's all in Perth, and her father got sick a few years back, so Emma and the kids moved over here. I was commuting a little bit from Sydney to Perth last season. I was probably going to leave the year before, to be honest, mate. And then when Stevie got the job, I wanted to stay in. Obviously, the relationship I have with Stevie, I wanted to stay and help him in his first year as a head coach. And thankfully, you know, it was a great honour for me to win the very first grand final with Stevie. He scored the winning goal, 2010. Both of us picked up the trophy on stage together, and then to share that moment last year in Perth with him as a head coach was the right time for me to move on. So, but yeah, look, it's I speak to Stevie probably once or twice a week, and that's how I've ended up in Perth, mate.
Well, let's go back to some of those great memories that you mentioned just then. But before that, you actually didn't start your football career here in Australia. It was over in Northern Ireland, where you were obviously from growing up. It wasn't the number one sport by any sort of means over there, football particularly, but in your case it was. How did you sort of grow up into playing football and eventually get that move to England?
Yeah, look, as you say, Davey, I grew up in a little village in Northern Ireland called Swatra, and that was it. I was born in 1981, so that was at the height of the Troubles in Ireland. And so the little village where I was born and raised, where my family still live now, is a Catholic village. So we played Gaelic football and hurling. I played for the local Gaelic team, Michael Davids, GAC in Swatra. And then from there I went to high school, St. Patrick's College, Mahara. And the high school was a very populated high school. So it was basically a amalgamation of all the little villages in the surrounding areas. All the kids would go to this high school. So with that, it was basically we had all the best Gaelic players in the whole region. So the school was pretty strong in Gaelic and hurling. And we predominantly win most trophies, Ulster titles, All-Ireland titles. And I got a little bit bored with it, to be honest, Davey. And my uncle, who is a massive influence in my career, especially through my playing days and still now, encouraged me to play soccer, to play football. So we joined a little club called Glenview United. And from there, we had a relatively successful season. I was there for one season. And then I joined a stronger team in the area called Mahara Colts. And from there, Mahara Colts was probably the strongest boys club in the area. There's a tournament in Northern Ireland. Some people might be familiar with it, called the Milk Cup. It's one of the prestigious youth tournaments in all of Europe. Clubs from all the English Premier League clubs, Serie A, Bundesliga, national teams, Brazil. They come from all over the world to play in this tournament. So we entered the tournament as South Derry, which is our local region, but it was basically the Mahara Colts team. And from there, then I had a decent tournament. Got invited for a couple of trials at different clubs in England. And then from there, I was selected for the Northern Ireland Schoolboys. There's a tournament, again, for the home nations called the Adidas Victory Shield, which is England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. So that was a pretty big thing for me when I was a kid to get picked in that team. We played. Joe Cole was playing for England. There was a lot of really good players around my age that was playing for the different countries. But we actually played against the Republic of Ireland down in Dublin, and John O'Shea was playing for the Republic of Ireland at the time, and it was, it was the worst game of football probably you'll ever see. Under 15s, schoolboy football, pissing down rain. There was 2 men and a dog at the game. Finished 0-0, and then after the game, the academy director at QPR was at the game, a guy called Chris Keeler, and on the back of that, they offered me a contract at Queen's Park Rangers.
And that's what took you over there. Didn't you have a trial as well at Manchester United at some stage with John O'Shea? I seem to remember this.
Yeah, we went to Man United with John O'Shea. And it was funny, actually, we went to QPR at the same time in the next couple of oldies. And then John went, obviously, off to Man United and did what he did and won Premier Leagues, FA Cups, Champions Leagues, and all of the rest. So yeah, but that's a great thing with football, Davey. You know, you meet wonderful people. You pass cross for a short period of time. You go your own ways, and then down the track, you cross paths again. So yeah, that's how I ended up at QPR, mate.
And you, down in London as a Northern Irish boy, would have had to have gone through some sort of schooling and college. I remember you telling me that there was quite a few guys who went on and played for England who were part of that same college course back in the day.
Yeah, so that was, I think that was 1997. So it was just after Euro 96, the following season. QPR just got relegated out of the Premier League. I went across. Stuart Houston was the manager, with Bruce Rioch was the assistant manager. Bearing in mind, I come from a village with 240 people in the village. And all of a sudden I was in London, and there was actually more people living on my street in London than I'll probably ever come in contact with in my life. So it was a big culture shock, to be honest, mate. But it was great. The people at the club was great. Warren Neill was the youth team coach at the time. Gary Micklewhite was there, and then Gary Waddock came in a little bit later on. We were fortunate. Queen's Park Rangers and Northern Ireland there was a lot of connection there. So big Alan McDonald, God rest him, was the captain when I went there. Richard Graham was there. Mark Graham, his brother, was there, and then we had a couple of boys from Dublin as well. Barry Andrews, Dave Whittle from Waterford. So there's a real strong Irish connection. So yeah, it made settling in pretty smooth, pretty easy. And like you said, we had to go to college every Wednesday. So we trained Monday, Tuesday. We predominantly have a night out Tuesday night. There's a local nightclub in Ealing Broadway, the Boulevard, which was a bit of a haunt for all the local players. And then Wednesday was college day. So at that time, we did our college with Arsenal and West Ham. So there's a lot of, obviously, Joe Cole, Jermaine Defoe then joined later on. Chelsea, the second year we did it with Chelsea as well. So you had John Harley, John Terry, Bertie Braley from West Ham. Yes, there's a lot of lot of boys that good people, mate. You know, everyone was just trying to do the same thing. Everyone was trying to make it as a player. And you say you build up them relationships and friendships, but there wasn't a lot of college work done. I'll tell you that.
But your time at QPR was one of your favourite times over in the UK.
Yeah. Look, it was a really good time, especially early on. You know, we obviously, as I said, we got relegated out of the Premier League. We come down. There was a real emphasis on trying to get promoted back in. I was only in the youth team at the time, but we had players like John Spencer, Trevor Sinclair, Simon Barker, Carl Reddy, Danny Maddox, Rufus Brevitt, and these were all. Andy Impey had just left, went to Nottingham Forest. Good friend of mine, actually, Andrew McDermott. He just left, went to West Brom as well. So the quality of players that was there should have got us promoted back to the Premier League. But unfortunately, you know, what football's like, mate, you get on a run and where you just can't get 3 points. You know, we were going away to places like Wolves and winning 1-0 and drawn in the last couple of minutes. Then we ended up, Stuart left, Stuart Houston left, Bruce Rake left, and Ray Harford came in. God rest him, he's dead now as well. And he brought Ian Dowie in as his assistant coach and Vinnie Jones. So Vinnie came in as our reserve team coach. So by this time I was progressed out of the youth team and was predominantly playing reserve team football. So we had Vinnie Jones as our reserve team coach with Ian Dowie. And again, just... Was that good? Sorry?
That was a good mix, I suppose.
It was. We had a lot of fun, to be honest, mate. We didn't win many games, but we had a lot of fun. But it was just being around them types of people, Davey, and them the experience that was in the dressing room at that time. That for me was a real life lesson in learning up, growing up very quick. It was a very good time to learn my craft. Like Warren Neill, who was my youth team coach, is probably one of the best development coaches that I've worked with. I've worked with a lot of good coaches in the past. We'll probably touch on it further down the discussion. But he was the first real coach that made me see the game 2 or 3 passes ahead and seeing the game and seeing how the game developed. So he really taught me a lot, really, and where I ended up in my career. But yeah, look, we went through a lot at QPR. We got that was at the time when the Premier League had broken away from the Football League. They'd signed a big television deal with B-Sky B. ITV Digital came in and took over the Football League. So it was a promise of a lot of money. I think you were involved in that yourself, Davey, weren't you, at one point, from a journalist point of view? There was a lot of money that was promised. And before the money actually came in, the clubs had spent it. So basically put players on contracts on the provision that this money was coming in from ITV Digital. Unfortunately, ITV Digital went bust, if you like. Didn't eventuate, and there was about 19 of us released on the same day. So yeah, from there it was an interesting period where the club had gone into administration. We played Wolves on the last day of the season, and Steve Corica actually played for Wolves on that day. We drew 1 each, and that was on the Sunday. On the Wednesday, we had a meeting with the manager, and it was basically to let us know what was happening in the future. I walked into the manager's office, who was Ian Holloway at the time, and there was another guy sitting in the gaffer's chair. And I'd never seen this guy before in my life. And he basically asked what my name was. He looked down his sheet of paper, saw my name, put a red line through it, and said, "Look, thank you very much for all your time and all your effort at the club. Your time at the club finishes today." And that was basically it. And I was out the door, mate.
But I think the fact that you were living in that sort of Shepherd's Bush area in the north of London, which is a predominantly Australian settlement in London, if you like, meant that you'd obviously met your wife. and that kind of gave you the opportunity a little bit down the line to come and head to Australia. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that all came about after that, the move to Sydney?
Yeah, look, obviously Emma was travelling, as a lot of Australians do, and they visit the UK. And as you say, Davey, that there's a big expat Australian community in West London, Ealing Broadway, Acton, Shepherd's Bush, all around that area. I met Emma in London. She was actually working in the hospital. She was a nurse at the time. And like I say, I got released at QPR. We started going out together. Then moved to a club called Woking. So at that time, as I said, the ITV Digital had collapsed. So a lot of the money in the Football League was gone. Conference teams at that time was paying more money than Football League clubs. So a guy called Colin Lippiott was the gaffer at Woking. And he rang me up pre-season, said, look, come down we're playing Swindon on the weekend, come down for a game. So I went down, played the game. After the game, he basically offered me a contract. He offered me more money than I was on at QPR. And at that time, people were sort of scratching around for jobs in football. There wasn't a lot of jobs going. So I signed the contract. It was a 2-year deal at Woking. Colin had signed probably over 30 players at this time. So we had a lot of games, a lot of cup competitions. He was rotating the squad, but there was a lot of us that wasn't playing. Colin had left, and a sort of a legend of the non-league, if you like, in England, Jeff Chappell, came in. And Jeff basically had to cut the wage bill. So he called me in and said, look, there's about 6 or 7 of us came in, and he said, look, you're not going to play. Here's a settlement. Off you go. So that was it. I was prepared to leave the club, and then a good friend of mine, Gareth Graham, who I played with for Northern Ireland, all the junior national teams, he was at Margate. So Gareth was at Crystal Palace then when he went to Brentford, and he was the same. He was a victim of the ITV Digital collapse as well. So he ended up at Margate. Ginge rang me up and said, look, we're looking for a midfielder. Do you fancy it? Come down here. I was still living in London at the time. I thought, Margate's right down the south of England. And I thought it's a bit too far, to be honest. He said, mate, the good thing is we all train, all the players live in London, and we train in London. So we actually only went to Margate for the games. And, what you were saying earlier about the most enjoyable time in England, Davey, that Margate was probably the most enjoyable time of football. Just the camaraderie we had with that group of boys, the togetherness. This was a group of boys that had got promoted, about 5 or 6 leagues. And the club was brilliant for them because the club kept them all on. They could have went and got players from higher divisions to come play, but all the boys went through that together. So boys like Paul Lamb, Simon Beard, Phil Collins, real good guys. We used to get on the train at London Euston, so we'd get the train to every game. Bus would pick us up at the other side. We'd go to the ground, come back. And it was just a real good togetherness. And then from there, I was still in the national team. So I was still playing for Northern Ireland. Sammy McElroy was the manager of Northern Ireland at the time, and his assistant was Jim Harvey. And Jimmy was also the manager of Morecambe. So every time we'd meet up for national team camps, Jimmy would always say, look, you got to come to Morecambe, this and that. Eventually, Jimmy put a bid in for me. I went to Morecambe, and I went up there and played for him for a season. I was still with Emma, as you said, at the time, and then I sort of fell out of favour with Jimmy up there, lost my place in the team, and that's when the A-League was starting. So Emma wanted to come back to Australia. I basically just wrote an email to all the clubs, mate, and Sydney was the only club that replied to me, so I came for a trial.
And what did Pierre Letbarski say to you that first season? I think you and Carnes were the last two, Dave Carney were the last two to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, I came in February. It was supposed to be a week's trial, so there was about 12 of us trialists on that first week. At the end of the first week, there was probably about 7 or 8 that left. and then there was a few of us that stayed on. Carnes came in the start of the following week, and then Matthew Bingley got signed. So going into the last couple of days of that week, Pierre and Ian Crook pulled Carnes and myself and said, look, we're going to sign you. It's going to be a 1-year deal. That was in February, like I said. We were going to Dubai in April for a pre-season tour. And they basically put it in Carnes and my contract that we had to lose 5 kilos each by the time we went to Dubai for the pre-season trip. So, mate, there we were every morning, me and Carnes in the Fat Club with Darren Welsh, who was a fitness coach at the time, at Football New South Wales at Parklea, 6:30 in the morning, running, in the pool, swimming, on the bikes, and then we joined in with the boys as well. So we were doing 3-4 sessions a day just to try to get the weight off, and thankfully we did get the weight off. And yeah, that was it. We headed off to Dubai for pre-season, man.
And what a season it turned out to be. I mean, obviously going all the way and winning the grand final. Do you remember much about the characters involved? I know we mentioned Pierre Libarski there and what he'd said to you. I know there's some stories about him and how he used to try and motivate the players during that season.
Yeah, Pierre was brilliant, Dave, to be honest. Just the mentality that he brought to the football club to start with, and through the individuals within the club. We knew we were going to win that season. We knew we were going to win the grand final that year. Every single thing we did every day in training was focused on winning. And there was consequences if you lost. There was rewards when you won. I think we won a tournament in Gosford very early on, which was to qualify for the Oceania Championships. We went across to Tahiti, won that. That qualified us then for the Club World Championships in Japan. So I think before the A-League actually kicked off, we played something like 19, 20 games, and we'd won every one of them. And that mentality, like Pierre, there used to be times he'd say, we'd be at Parklea training, and he'd say, what's the quickest way to the airport? And someone would say, straight down the M2. And he'd say, I think the M5's quicker. And so we'd go, and we'd be sitting in the group check-in. He'd come sprinting down at the airport, run into the group check-in, sit down, pull out his laptop, get it up on his lap. And then Ian Crook would walk in, and Pierre would say, see, I told you I was quicker. And we were like, this guy doesn't stop. He just wants to win everything. So I think that mentality, Davey, really came through in all the players. And like going into the grand final, we knew we were going to win, even though, to be honest, we got battered probably the first 15, 20 minutes from Central Coast. And it was a great feeling when we did win it, mate.
I remember you got the story about how he motivated the team before that. I think there was the game against Adelaide in the semi-final, the incident with a bucket of water, and then the final itself.
Yeah, he was always doing little things, Davey. The very first one was the very first game we played as a club was against Melbourne Victory at it was Aussie Stadium, it was called back then, the Allianz, the old football stadium. And then the week leading into the game, there was all talk about there's going to be 25,000, 30,000, 35,000, all this. So the boys was all getting ready for it. And the team talk was around nerves, and it was all about, are we going to be, how would nerves affect people, and to run out in front of 25, 30, 35,000 people. I think they ended up 33,000 at the game. And all the time he was doing this team talk, he had his hands behind his back, and he was talking about what is noise, what's noise, it's only noise. So we're all standing in a huddle, and then he's pulled out this air horn and blasted it in the changing room, nearly put everyone deaf. So he said, nothing's going to be louder than that, and I go and win the game. So we ran out onto the pitch, and we actually drew the game. Archie Thompson scored first, and then Yorke got the equaliser. Yeah, the grand final, we came in the changing room, and he'd set down 2 chairs side by side. He had a piece of wood across the chair. And everyone was thinking, well, what's this all about? What's this doing here? So everyone that went near it, he was sitting out the back, and he just shouted, don't touch it, don't touch it. Everyone that came in. And that was the team talk. It was this piece of wood that was maybe about 1 metre long. And that was the difference in winning and losing the grand final that day was an extra meter run, that extra effort, the taking care on your pass, a meter each side of the player, you're not going to get it. Shots on goal. Yeah, it was just his attention to detail was phenomenal, something that I really, really took from him as a boss. Sorry, the sun's killing me.
It's all right. Yeah, shift it around a bit. He must have been he was obviously a big miss. And then Terry Butcher came in the next season. Was there a change in kind of personalities from between him and Terry?
Yeah, look, every coach is different, Davey. You know that. Terry himself was a big character, big character. Obviously played for England, captain England, played for Rangers, Ipswich, that great Ipswich team with Bobby Robson. Yeah, it was. Look, what people forget that season was we were top of the league. We were top of the league until we got done with the salary cap. So we got deducted. I think it was 3 points, and that put us back to third in the league, which meant then we had to play Newcastle in the semi-final instead of having a week off. So, look, every coach brings something different. Terry liked to have more of a relaxed atmosphere and relaxed training sessions. Crookie was still there as the coach at the time, assistant coach. Crookie did a lot of the sessions. Terry, obviously being a defender himself, he did a lot of the defensive work. Crookie did a lot of stuff in the front third and midfield. But yeah, some of the best things was obviously, again, having that knowledge in the room. Crookie, Terry Butcher, some of the stories he had with World Cup campaigns with England and nights out with Gaza with Rangers and things like that. So yeah, it was a good time, Davey. But yeah, like you said, then he moved on at the end of that season as well.
Then seasons 3 and 4, were they particularly memorable? I mean, there was a bit of a change in head coach both seasons as well. No silverware, but yeah. Season 5 was a bit more special, I think.
Yeah, look, we went through probably a bit of a lean spell after Terry left. Branko Kalina came in, and we had that good Champions League run. I think the first game was Shanghai Shenhua away. Stevie Corica scored the first goal for the club, first Australian player to score for an Australian club in the Champions League, which was great. Urawa Red Diamonds, we drew with them 0-0 in Saitama, and at that time only one team got out of the group. So we drew with them in Sydney 2-2. We drew with them 0-0 in Japan, and they actually went on to win the tournament that year, the Champions League. So I really think that squad, we had a chance to do something in the Champions League that year, and unfortunately it wasn't to be. So domestically, things didn't start off too well for us. Branko then left, and Cosy came in. John Cosmina came in after that. And things was good. Cosy was bringing through a lot of young players at that time. Young Matty German, Anthony Golick, Brendan Gann, Kofi Danning. A lot of these young, Ryan Grant, Cosy gave Ryan Grant his debut. A lot of these young boys that was in and around the youth team that they had won the NYL with Steve O'Connor. And Cosy was giving them a chance now. Like you say, after that, then Cosy left. Poppa took over for a couple of pre-season games, and that's where we went to Shanghai. At that time, we had a partnership with Shanghai Shenhua, and we went across there, and that's where we met Vidislav Levitska and Michael Zak, his assistant. So we actually met them in China, and then they come back for pre-season. Vicha and Michael came in, and that was the coaching staff that, as you said, season 5, then we won the double.
Do you find, or do you feel in the lead up that was going to be a special season for the club, just with the players that you had and obviously the difference in coaching? Yeah,
Vicha, as you know, Davey, is one of the nicest men in football. And he knew everything. He knew everything about every player's family, their children, their wives, their mums and dads. And he went out of his way to make everyone feel special. So everyone wanted to play for him. Everyone wanted to go that extra yard for him. And the coaching staff we had at that time, Poppa was assistant, Michael Zank, assistant, John Phelan was the goalkeeper coach. Obviously Stan Avances, Joey Muir, We had a real good staff at the time. The players we had was really experienced players. So you'd Steve Corica, Clint Bolton, Simon Colosimo, Stefan Keller, John Aloisi, Carl Kissel, all experienced players, mate. And then in and around that, you had Stu Michalik, Mark Bridge, Alex Brosk, myself, Shannon Cole, Bjorn, the left back who scored the winning penalty in the grand final. So that year, we probably had the best team, to be honest, mate. If you look around each position in the league, we had the best player in each position across the whole league. So, yeah, it was just disappointing we didn't get to do it in Sydney in front of our own fans. Obviously, going down to Melbourne, being the first team to win a grand final away from home was pretty special as well.
Yeah, what do you remember particularly about that game?
Mate, what I remember, the game itself wasn't particularly that good of a game. I think we had. Sorry, I'm just moving out of the sun.
All right.
There we go. Yeah, the game itself wasn't that particularly good game, mate. We had started off okay. In the lead up to the game, we lost Stevie Corica, who's our captain and leader. We lost him in the semi-final, the first one. And then John Aloisi and myself was vice captains. And in the lead up to the second game, Johnny got injured as well. So it meant then I was the captain on the day. During the week, we had a meeting with Stevie, and he had told us that he was going to retire. So that was the only motivation we needed, man. Just to win the grand final for Stevie and to send him out a winner and a champion that he is. And that was the motivation we had for that week. And probably in football, that was one of the most special moments for me personally. To be able to stand on the stage and share the stage with Stevie and pick up the trophy together, it was a special feeling, man.
I can imagine. The penalties and all the drama that had gone before it, how much of an added sort of bonus was that, or would you rather have done it in a different way? In fact, were you going to take a penalty, or because obviously there was only no, you might have had to.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, look, going into obviously us and Melbourne was the two best teams all season. I think it came down to Valentine's Day. It was neck and neck all the way through that season. The semi-final, again, was tight. And then going into that game, there's a little bit of niggle in the background, if you like, between the players and coaches and different things that was going on. When we went down there for the game, we bunkered down in the hotel, and it was basically our whole focus was to win the grand final for Stevie. To go to penalties, I remember just at the end of extra time, Papa just going around everyone, putting everyone in order who was going to take the penalties. And then when it came down to Bjorn to hit the last one, bearing in mind he's played left back all season, we all thought he was left-footed. So he set the ball down, he's walked back, and then he's walked around as if he's going to hit it with his right foot. So we're all standing on the halfway line thinking, what the hell's he doing? What's he doing? And then he stepped up, scored the penalty, and then obviously we had won the grand final. So I remember that night, everyone saying, Bjorn, why'd you hit it with your right foot? He said, I'm right-footed. So he played the whole season at left back, and we all thought he was left-footed.
I think Clint Bolton mentioned that when we spoke to him a little while back. But the celebrations, I bet, were pretty special down there. And then when you came back the next day on the Sunday, I seem to remember. Yeah. Look, that was a good times, mate. And you mentioned it before, Clint Bolton. We won 2 grand finals together, and I think that's what football clubs do, and good times within football clubs do, is they create memories for people, and they create bonds with people. I think that first season, you're talking now, what's that, 15 years ago or more, and all them boys that are there, like you had them on the other day, Sash Petrovsky, Alvin Chekali, Jacob Timpano,
Justin Passfield, Ian Fife, Robbie Middleby, Yorke. No, they're all great people, and we're all still in contact now. And again, with the 2010 team, we had a good night out in Melbourne. I think the chairman had booked out a nightclub for us down there, so we had a good night there. We got back to Sydney. There was a reception for us at the Domain, which was excellent. And then from there, it's a bit of a blur, to be honest, mate.
I can imagine. I think your final game for the club also might have been. Do you remember what it was? It was obviously against a team you were obviously very familiar with in the 2010 season.
Yeah, look, my first game for Sydney FC was against Melbourne Victory. Like I said, on a 1-1 draw at Allianz, Aussie Stadium, whatever it was then. And my last game was against Melbourne Victory as well. Australia Day, and we won 5-0 down there. So, yeah, look, I've had some great games, some great battles, over years, but there was nothing but respect, Davey. You know, the players they had at the time. I think the first year, obviously Archie Thompson, Kevin Muscat, Danny Alsop, good players, hard players, but solid as well. You know, as the years went on, Carlos Hernandez, Christian Sarkis, yeah, just Vinny Leah. You know, when the game finished, it was forgot about. You know, you can be as tough as you can possibly be, and at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing for our clubs. You know, we're trying to win the game of football and trying to get 3 points for our team and for the supporters. And that's, you know, that's as a supporter, that's all you ask, really.
I remember Clint Bolton, actually, another thing he told me a few weeks back was that you'd often have a sarky comment that you could say on the field or a bit of banter with some of the other players. He said he'd never do it because he didn't have it. If he did say something and they said something back to him, he wouldn't have a follow-up. So, but that was all part of it, I suppose, with Melbourne Victory.
It was, man. It was. Look, and I was never the best player, so I needed to use anything I possibly could to get in the head of the opposition and try and put them off their game if I could. And my job primarily was to try and put them off their game, get the ball and give it to the players who could play. And I was very fortunate to have players like Steve Corica, Alex Bross, Dave Carney, Sash Petrovsky, Del Piero, Milos Dimitrovic. These great players around me that I could basically give them the ball and sit back and watch. And I've got a great picture here in my house of the 2006 grand final when Stevie scored, and I was directly behind him. So, you know, I tell everyone that for that grand final goal, I had the best seat in the house.
You certainly did. And what a seat in the house it was when you actually gave the game away at the end of that season where we won 5-0. Do you remember the final match of the season where you were farewelled by the crowd and I suppose the fantastic tifo, if you like, that the Cove made for you?
Yeah, look, Dave, that was a very special day for me and my family, and I've always had a great relationship with the Cove. You know, back in 2006, we had a family tragedy. 2005, sorry. And when we came out to play against Central Coast, the Cove had a banner that said, "Terry, in times of need, the Cove is with you." And bearing in mind, this was a new club, new supporter group, new group of players. And from that day, I always said I'd never play for another club against Sydney FC. 2014, as you said, was a season where didn't go to plan, didn't go as we wanted. Frankie was the manager. Frankie left at the end of the season. There's a lot of players out of contract. So I made the decision to retire. I had a couple of offers from other A-League clubs to continue playing, but I wanted to stay true to my word and not play against Sydney. So yeah, that day was very special. It was actually against Perth Glory as well. So to come out and me and my family were just completely blown away by the effort and the time that the people in the COVID had put into that tifo and into the banner, and you know, made sure that I went around and thanked them all personally. All the guys in the club, they're all great guys, man. And the things that they've done for the football club over the 15, 16 years, you know, that's why it's so important with this period that we're in at the minute now, that we get football back up and going for the supporters, as much as for the players and the administrators and the coaches. They're a very, very important part of the game.
They certainly are, Terry. Certainly are. And obviously, you were still very much involved with the club after you finished playing as well. What were the memorable parts of those final few years up until around about this time last year when you left? Obviously, you were a big part of Graham Arnold's backroom staff after that, and Steve Corica last year helping with the recruitment for a fair amount of that time as well.
Yeah, look, as I said, I retired in 2014. Frankie had left, and the club was looking for a new manager. So at that time, Arnie had just come back from Japan, and the chairman, Scott Barlow, rang me up and invited me to a meeting with Arnie at his office. So I went and met with Arnie. We sat down, we had a discussion about the club, good, bad, indifferent things in my experiences with the club, and we hit it off straight away, to be honest, Davey, Arnie, myself, and we thought the same in terms of football. We thought the same in terms of environment, in terms of how you treat people, and that was it. Arnie basically said, look, I want you as part of my staff. So I joined straight away, and we set about not changing the culture, but set about trying to instill a sense of passion and sense of belonging into players that was coming into the club, into staff who worked at the club. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, we had a hell of a lot of fun as a staff, as a group of people. That first year, we got the grand final, 2015, down in Melbourne. In many ways, with that group of players, not being disrespectful, but we probably overachieved that season. And then beyond that, it was more or less then starting to look at how we can put in place a recruitment policy, put in place a just an environment where we could actually get the best out of people. And then from then, one thing led to another, and we just went on that unbelievable run in that 2016-17 season, where we won everything, and barring a referee's decision. It's the only one time that I've ever wanted to have VAR in the game. Was the game when Robbie Cornthwaite tripped Broski in the box, and our good friend Mr. Breath said no penalty.
Could have been a season, an invincible season, as Arnie used to call it.
Yeah, and that all started out as a bit of fun as well with Arnie. He brought that out, that would be the Invincibles and go through the season unbeaten, and then week by week we were winning, draw, winning, and it started to become sort of real. Yeah, he started to say, well, hang on, this is a realistic chance here. This is for real. And like I say, only for that one blip on the radar was it would have happened, but that's football, you know, at the end of the day. And again, to win it that season at home on penalties again against Melbourne Victory, it was pretty special.
Yeah, it certainly was. And then obviously you still had another 2 years left with the club. Obviously another year with Arnie. The year we won the Premier's Play at the FFA Cup for the first time, with the likes of Adrian Mierziewski in the team, Yori Bosch that season. Obviously Bobo was still here, and then season after, when Steve took charge, helping him to the grand final win last year in Perth, which was I imagine was pretty special for you, considering he's a guy that you've known for quite some time.
Yeah, it was special, Davey. You know, as I said, Stevie was one of the first people that I met when I joined the club back in 2005. I remember sitting at Parkley when I was on trial, and the first two people that drove into the car park was a guy called Steve Laurie, who was in the first season, and Stevie Corica, and both of them drove in Porsches. I sort of remember thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Seriously. So anyway, like I say, I've known Stevie for a hell of a long time. We've been good friends for 15, 16 years from it all started back then. Like I said, I could have left when Arnie left, but when Arnie took the Socceroos job, Stevie's time was now. His time was right to take on the head coach's role. And it was about going through the process with the board, Danny and the chairman, and really putting Stevie's case forward as to he deserves this chance. He'd done everything for the club. Won 2 championships as a player, won the youth championship as a coach with the MYL squad, was assistant coach for 5 or 6 years. So now was his time. So I just didn't feel it was right for me to leave him in the lurch for that one season, because Arnie had left, Clarkey had left, Dougie had left, John Crowley had left. Sorry, JC was still there. So there was a big part of that staff from 2017 and 18 season that had left. So I didn't want add any more.
Some of the players as well.
Yeah, some of the players.
There was a gap in players as well. Yeah.
So we still had, like you said, we had players to find. I think Bobo had gone, Adrian had gone, and when you take
Luke
them,
Wiltshire, Geordie.
Luke Wiltshire, Geordie had left as well. Big characters in the dressing room, which is hard to replace. And on the performance side of it, if you think Bobo and Adrian, I think there was something like 41 goals between them two. Adrian had something like 16, 17 assists as well. So going into your first season as the head coach, you've lost your top goal scorer, potentially your best player of your group. So I felt I had to stay and help Stevie. And thankfully we were able to bring in Alfie, who was brilliant. Got us the goals last season. And like I said before, Sim came in as well. Sim came in on loan, did very well. He was a little bit unlucky with injuries here and there. Danny De Silva was another one who did well. Was a little bit unlucky with injuries. Joshi and Brandon, that you know what you get with them too. Look, to finish the season with Stevie as a champion, then it was the right thing to do and move on.
Nice for you to do it in Perth, as you say. Let's just reminisce a little bit more. Toughest opponent on the field that you faced?
In the A-League or ever?
Yeah, maybe one in the A-League, one ever.
In the A-League, probably Thomas Brush, to be honest. He was a player that just sort of drifted in between the lines, that always played just in behind you. So you never really knew where he was. And at that time, they had Matty Mackay and Massimo Madoka, Eric Pardelou in front of you in the midfield, and he was always just in behind you. So he was probably the hardest to track and to mark. We played Spain when I was playing for Northern Ireland on the 21s, and Fernando Torres absolutely ripped us to pieces. We lost the game 4-0, and he scored all 4 goals. So he was just unplayable, completely unplayable.
He would have been nice. We got close to getting him at one stage, didn't we? As you remember. But
yeah,
best player you played with?
Probably Peter Crouch. I think he was a player. He's obviously retired now, but people looked at Crouchy because of his size and because of how great he was in the air. They underestimated how good he was on the floor. He had great feet. He could read the game so well. His range of passing was excellent. Probably the best player that I've seen that I didn't get the opportunity to play with, which I regret, is Milos Ninkovic. Arnie used to get me to join in training when we were short of players here and there before I swallowed a beach ball. But some of the things Milos did in training, and then obviously the fans know and they've seen it what he can do on the pitch as well. But yeah, he's up there, one of the best players I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's fantastic, isn't he? Didn't Peter Crouch threaten to come play for Sydney a couple of times because he's your mate?
We had a few conversations with him after Big Marc left, after Janko left. We had a few discussions with him. He was at Stoke at that time. His contract was up at the end of the season, and then Stoke offered him another year, which obviously money in the Premier League in them day, and at the minute was ridiculous. So he stayed, and at the end of the following season, we had another conversation with him. But then obviously we had Bobo, and he did a fantastic job for us as well.
Yeah, he's fantastic as well. Yeah, we'll hopefully get to speak to him in the next few weeks. Just another one, your roommates, because you must have had a few when you were at Sydney FC.
Yeah, season 1, obviously me and Carnes, because we were in the fat club, we had a bit of a bond. So we were roommates together for that whole season, which was great fun. He's a great man, Dave. I know you had him on the other day. He's a fantastic person. Then Davey left. At the end of that season, he went to Sheffield United, and Broski came in. So I roomed with Broski for 5 years until he left and went to Japan. And then I roomed with Bridgie, Mark Bridge. Bridgie's a top guy as well. Like I said, all the players that came in around the club, you have great relationships with all of them. Good people, mate. Then Bridgie, when he went to the Wanderers, when they started up, I roomed with Big Ivan Nichevsky, and that was great fun as well, mate. He kept me entertained for hours with his magic tricks and his jokes, and really good guy.
Do you still keep in touch with many? I'm sure you do. I know you've got a contacts book, which is massive. Everyone in football seems to know Terry McFlynn, and you seem to know everyone else. But you keep in touch with these people a fair bit?
Yeah, I do, mate. I still speak to all the boys, as many as I can.
I got a phone call last night, you were telling me before, from somebody we've talked about already. Yeah,
I had a good conversation with Pierre last night, Pierre Labarski. It was his 60th birthday during the week, so I sent him a message. And then he called me last night just to see how the situation was in Australia. And he's in Wolfsburg now. He was the chief scout of Wolfsburg for many years, and he's actually just left that position, and he's working for the national team now. He's working for the German national team. So yeah, we had a bit like we're doing now, Dave. We reminisced about that season 1 and all the different characters we had there, and going across to Tahiti, going across to Japan for the Club World Cup, and all the different players we had in and around Yorke, and he's talking about Stevie and Driller and Rudes and Robbie Middleby, Andrew Packer. Yeah, all good guys, man.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on Yorke, but everyone just says the same thing about Yorke. He was a great night out, but also very, very professional on the field as well. So,
extremely professional, baby. Like people talk about all night Dwight, and the thing with Yorke is he didn't drink a lot. People thought he did, but he didn't. When he did have a drink, he had a good party, and then he might not have a drink for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks. But one of the most dedicated professionals that I've ever worked with. He was the first one on the training pitch, last one off the training pitch. And for me as a young boy then, I was 20, 23, 24, whatever it was when I came into the club. Listening to his stories and hearing what he had done, and obviously watching Match of the Day back home, Dwight Yorke, being able to train alongside him every day and learn from him every day was invaluable for me, as a kid. And at that time, the younger players was, like I say, Dave Carney, Ian Fife, Andrew Packer, myself, Jacob Timpano, Justin Passfield, Wade Oostendorp. We had an American guy, Alejandro Salazar, and just being in and around Yorke and learning from him was brilliant. But don't get me wrong, when we had a night out, it was a good night out. I think I remember after we won the grand final, 2006. It was actually part of his speech where he said, "Let's get this party started," and it started all right, and it didn't finish for about a week.
That was at the Star as well, I think. I seem to remember, who were on board with us all the way back then.
Yeah.
But, Terry, that's great. Fantastic memories. We've actually spent an hour nearly. It was only meant to be 25 minutes, but fantastic to hear some of those stories. And thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, always welcome back. We look forward to getting back on the field when we can play some more A-League matches and potentially see you in a final series at some point in the not too distant future.
Sounds good, Davey.
Thanks, Tez.
Take care, man. See you, pal.
Thanks, mate.